Thank you so much. What a joy, an honor, privilege to be back here in Kansas with so many friends. I'm so grateful. As I mentioned, as you saw in the video, some of the most blessed years of my life was serving here alongside the monks of St. Benedict's Abbey and at Benedictine College and in Focus here. Just a great joy, a great honor to be with you. So I want to say a few words, and I'll start off just by greeting Archbishop Naumann, Bishop Johnston, Father Abbot James, Abbot Benedict, and Prioress Esther, and all the monks of St. Benedict's Abbey and the wonderful friends that support and love the monastery here. Thank you again for honoring me and for being here tonight. The words I'd like to reflect on here, I think, are related to what the monks of St. Benedict Abbey stand for and the great tradition that they're in. But I want to bring it to some present realities. If you think about what happened during Holy Week this last year, all of us were just so deeply moved by those images we saw in Paris of Notre Dame, the beautiful cathedral on fire. And it wasn't just the building itself that touched our hearts, but we know that the love that was put into that building, the love for our Lord Jesus, the love for Our Lady, a love that is largely lost in France and Western Europe and in much of the Western world. A number of people have commented on how that there's a lot of symbolism in that horrible fire, a symbolism of this beautiful Catholic cathedral that was almost left in ruins. Kind of can remind us of the crisis of faith in our own modern age. You know, we live in a day and age where so many people, when they look at something like a belief in a God that's involved in our lives, or belief in a Bible or a church, or belief in moral truth, or even belief in just very basic human things like what is marriage, or what it means to be a man, or what it means to be a woman. These beliefs seem like strange artifacts from some bygone era. They don't really fit in the modern world. And then you add on the various scandals that our church has faced in recent years. And it seems as if the church itself, the Catholic Church itself, is on fire and in danger of collapse. But I'm here tonight to share with you a little bit of how I've been blessed to be a part of something that can give us all hope. And that is the long-standing tradition of Benedictines who have been a source of renewing culture. And I believe they can do it again, as they have in recent years. You know, if you go back to the video telling us the wonderful story of St. Benedict, many people know that St. Benedict stands at a turning point between two civilizations, between two eras in the history of the world, between the fall of ancient Rome and that civilization, and then the rise of something new, the rise of a new Christian culture. So Rome has fallen in the lifetime of St. Benedict. He grows up and comes of age where the Roman Empire has already fallen. There's decadence in Rome. He goes to study in Rome, and he's very dissatisfied by the moral decadence around him in a city that's plagued by war and economic and social strife. And St. Benedict dared to step out of the mainstream of that culture and live a different kind of life. Very different kind of life. And as the video showed, he goes off into the hill country outside of Rome, and he goes into the cave, lives a hermit's life in Subiaco. But Pope Benedict Emeritus has often pondered something important that happened a little bit later in Benedict's life. It happened around the year 529 AD. Around 529 AD was the time that some people say Plato's famous academy in Athens closes. And that was a great symbol of classical culture, a symbol of the great tradition of the virtues that have been passed on from one generation to the next. And that is coming to a close as Western civilization seems to be almost becoming extinct. But right at that same time, around 529 AD, St. Benedict makes the move from Subiaco to Monte Cassino, that beautiful little city on a hill, and he founds this great monastery. And he takes this life that he was starting there in Subiaco, and it now becomes much more public, and becomes what Pope Benedict calls the Academy of Christianity. It becomes a school of faith, a school of hope, a school of love, a school of the virtues, taking the best of classical tradition from Aristotle and Plato and infusing it with the values of Jesus Christ and the gospel. And as the video mentioned, all throughout Europe, and then hundreds and hundreds of these monasteries start spreading, and people want to live near these monasteries, to come in contact with this new way of life that was a way of life so much better than what the rest of the world was offering at that time. Let me share with you something Pope Benedict once said about this historic moment of the life of St. Benedict. And he relates it to our present day. He says, the public culture of the present day, today, is a culture characterized by the absence of transcendence, an absence of any sense of God. A culture in which Christianity is not seen as a force determining the shape of things anymore. But then Pope Benedict goes on to say, but I'm quite sure that the church will not lack creative energies even in the future. And then he turns back and he remembers St. Benedict. He says, think of late antiquity, where St. Benedict probably wasn't noticed at all. He was a dropout who came from noble Roman society and did something bizarre, something that then later turned out to be the ark on which the West survived. And in this sense, I think that today there are Christians who drop out of this strange consensus of modern existence and who attempt to form new forms of life. To be sure, they don't receive any public notice, but they're doing something that really points to the future. I share that quote with you because I think what we see in the life of St. Benedict, daring to not live according to the mainstreams of his falling civilization, daring to live a different kind of life and planting seeds, modeling for the future a new way of life that gave people hope, has happened in small ways but profound ways in our own lives. I want to turn back the clock to the 1990s, Atchison, Kansas. So this would be the prequel to these Abbott Table episodes. So in the 1990s, many people would have said that the Abbey was struggling in vocations. Many people would have said the college was struggling to keep its doors open. But if you look at what's happening today, it's amazing. Today, there's nearly a dozen men in formation at St. Benedict's Abbey. Today, St. Benedictine College is one of the top Catholic colleges in the country. So many wonderful things happening in Atchison, Kansas, that almost was completely unimaginable if you were living in the mid-1990s in Atchison, Kansas. What happened? How did that happen? I want to tell a story about the monks at St. Benedict's Abbey and how much we should be so grateful for them and all of the seeds that they planted in those early years that are bearing such tremendous fruit, not just in Atchison, but all around the world now. Let's talk about what was happening there. So in 1997, I was blessed to arrive in Atchison, Kansas for the first time for this 9-month appointment. I was just subbing in for a teacher, not realizing I would end up staying for 9 years. But I was there for 9 months, and I was just greeted by warm Benedictine hospitality. I'll never forget, they saw this poor single guy coming in. They loaned me their furniture. They found an apartment for me. They'd have me over for meals, and they were just such warmth and love as I was welcomed into the community there. And they've become lifetime friends, these wonderful monks at St. Benedict's Abbey. I'm so grateful for them. But the hospitality I want to talk about tonight is not just the kindness and warmth that they offered me, but I want to talk about the hospitality they created for faith and renewal of culture, the creating of space for faith to develop in their community and in the college that they served. I want to share with you a story of just 3 monks And there's so many of them I wish I could mention, but I'm going to just highlight the three that I was privileged to work most closely with in my years at Benedict College. One was featured in the video, Father Dennis Mead, a dear friend who I understand is ill and can't be here this evening. We will pray and remember Father Dennis here tonight. But as I mentioned in that video, I was a graduate student at Franciscan University. He heard me give this talk, and then we exchanged some emails, and I haven't heard from him in years. And I go off to Rome. I'm doing my doctorate. It's June. It's the middle of final exams, and I'm finishing my doctoral coursework, getting ready to go to Paris, where I'm going to brush up on my French, work on my dissertation, all excited about going to France. And I get this call from Father Dennis Mead asking me, would you like to come to Atchison, Kansas and teach for 9 months? And really, I remember thinking, oh, sure, Father, I'll pray about it. And I'm looking, Paris? Atchison, Kansas? I know what I'm doing. There's no way I'm going to Kansas. I'm going to Paris next year. But I did tell him I would pray about it. And I sensed in prayer and through counsel with some good friends, I said, you know what? I'll go to Paris the next year. You can live anywhere for 9 months, so I'll go to Atchison for 9 months. And it was a great blessing. Even though it turned out to be 9 years, it was an even greater blessing. But Father Dennis had such a care for that theology department. And as you know, philosophy and theology are like the queen and the king of the sciences, and really are like the flagship in any academic program. They're so important, and he cared for that department. And he took such time to coach and mentor Richard White and I in those early years, guiding us, offering us advice, helping us navigate through some very delicate situations at different times. And he was always very careful, wanting to make sure we hire the right people to build something for the future. And today, this small little theology department, I think we had like maybe 7 majors, Richard, when we first got started there in 97, 98, has, how many majors do we have now? 128 theology majors. Benedictine College has one of the largest theology departments in the United States. But that may not have happened if it wasn't for one monk by the name of Father Dennis Mead, who dared to live a different kind of life and create space for authentic Catholic faith to grow and flourish. I want to tell about another great monk. And it was so great to hear his voice singing and chanting today. It's been a long time since I've heard that voice of Father Meinrad Miller. Father Meinrad Miller was the head of campus ministry in these years. And he provided so much space for people to encounter Jesus in retreats, in Mass, in confession, in service to care for the poor, in promoting the dignity of all human life and caring for the unborn. He did so much to serve those students and just create this space for them to encounter Jesus and the fullness of Catholicism. But one of the moving parts about Father Meinrad I'll never forget is his holy hour. He would offer a holy hour. Now, for those, I know there are, how many ravens do we have out there in the audience here? So we have many ravens there. Many of you are probably graduating in the last 10, 15 years are thinking, what's the big deal about a holy hour? We do that all the time. That's all over the place. Students go to do holy hours at St. Benedict's Church many times, right? But back in the day, that was revolutionary, that Father Meinrad offered a holy hour. And sometimes the students would show up and they'd pray with him, but there were many times where he was the only one praying. And the students never showed up. And he would still be faithful to Jesus and offer the holy hour and pray for those students to show up. Father Meinrad created space for us to be able to pray when Focus was launched. How many Focus people do we have here in the audience? We have some Focus folks, all right? So, and the way, when Focus was born, we had about 5 students in the fall of 1998. That came back after one semester in the spring when Focus was born. And these 5 students dedicated to pray, to fast for student conversions on campus. And they committed for 6 weeks after Mass, after that Mass in St. Martin's Chapel, to just fall on their knees before the Blessed Sacrament and pray for conversions in the drama department, conversions on the football team, conversions in the journalism department, conversions in the business department. They just prayed for all the student government leaders. They prayed for an end of drunkenness and unchastity on campus. And I got to tell you, one of the most amazing things was to watch it all happen. All their prayers came true. I've never seen grace explode like this before. Right before my eyes, you saw all these conversions, all these people changing their lives, committing to sobriety, committing to chastity, committing to Jesus. And it was like, whoa, it was amazing. But that would have never happened. The birth of Focus, I don't think would have exploded like it did at Benedictine College. Within 3 to 4 years, 1 out of 4 students were in Bible studies in Focus. And now that movement spread across the United States and overseas, touching tens of thousands of lives every year. That may not have happened if it wasn't for one faithful monk praying many times alone for conversions on campus and creating that space for these young people to pour out their hearts and pray for others to join them in Father Meinrad Miller. The last person I'll remember is my dear friend, Father Brendan Rolling. Father Brendan was off at St. Vincent's in seminary, but he came back and served in the student life office. And he was very instrumental in helping transform all of residence life, intentionally creating a culture in the dorms and on the campus to support Catholic faith, to support a life of virtue. And he poured his life out into this. I remember he tells a story oftentimes about how before he got on the job, there were like these 2 binders that were there of all of these, discipline issues that they had to deal with. And then he showed up one year and he was working in tandem with Focus, and he saw, it's down to 1 binder. And then the next year he was sitting down with me and Curtis. He goes, and now look, these are the only couple disciplinary papers I have to deal with now. In a short order, he worked with so many other people on campus to create a culture, a healthy environment for students to encounter Christ and live a virtuous life. And he poured his heart out into those students. And I meet students all over the place, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of students who've told me their lives have been deeply touched by Father Brendan, who gave them spiritual direction, heard his confessions, inspired them, encouraged them in leadership, and have gone on to do great things in the Catholic Church. And so when people today come to Benedictine and experience this amazing place of great Catholic culture on the campus, that may not have happened if it wasn't for a faithful monk living in that tradition of St. Benedict to create renewal of culture. Let me close with one last thought, and this one comes from Pope Benedict, who chose the name Benedict because of St. Benedict. He makes this great observation about that pivotal moment of the move from Subiaco, from Benedict's life, to Monte Cassino, from that private hermitage to this big city on the hill that would then spread all throughout Europe. That private life to the public life. It's a beautiful little insight here. He says this: Benedict's exodus from the remote valley where Subiaco was to Monte Cassino, a plateau dominating the vast surrounding plain which can be seen from afar, has a symbolic character. A hidden monastic life has its own raison d'etre, its own reason for existence. But a monastery also has its public purpose in the life of the church and of society, and it must give visibility to the faith as a force of life. And on this evening, I think we all should give great thanks to the many Benedictine monks and sisters throughout history, but especially tonight we give great thanks for the Benedictine monks at St. Benedict's Abbey who gave their lives all throughout this long-standing tradition, last century and a half, but especially in recent decades, to help transform a culture, not only within their own abbey, but on the campus at Benedictine College. And may they inspire us to live this tradition as well, that we may go out in Benedictine hospitality, in whatever spheres of influence we have, in our workplaces, in our communities, in our parishes, in our dioceses, in our families, will we be courageous like Father Dennis, Father Brendan, and Father Meinrad? Will we be radically generous to create that space for faith to grow? Because if we do, great things can happen. Thank you very much. May God bless you all.